Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the first workshop that Moonbeam's putting on for the Polkadot North America Hackathon. We're really excited to be involved in the Polkadot North America Hackathon. There's a ton of different interesting bounties across many different projects. Moonbeam has 4 bounties that we're sponsoring that are specific to Moonbeam, and we also have a shared bounty that we are co-sponsoring in part with Subquery, Akala, and Hydrodex. That's an Xcm Explorer. And I'll talk more about these bounties a little bit later in the presentation. I have a very exciting workshop put together for you today. It's going to be, a bit hands-on. So I have 3 different demos planned throughout the content, of the workshop. So the presentation will be broken up with various different demos in between. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. Feel free to ask any questions at any time, and I'll kind of pause periodically, and yeah, we can go from there. So the title of this workshop is Building Cross-Chain DApps with XC-20s. So today we'll do a quick introduction to Moonbeam. Most of you are probably all very familiar with Moonbeam, so we'll breeze through that in just a minute or two. Then we'll look at Xcm. We'll speak about how it works, how funds are transferred from Parachain to Relay Chain, and vice versa, and also Parachain to Parachain. Then we'll look at XC-20s. We'll look at how XC-20s are in use today, which apps are using them. We'll also look at a look ahead, and we will do a demo of transferring XC-20s across chain. We'll do that both via Polkadot.js and then also via a precompile. So there'll be a little bit of switching around with screen sharing. So forgive me if I need to stop and then reshare from time to time. I just need to transfer the window that I'm sharing. And we'll wrap up with a look at all the different bounties that we have. We'll talk about sample projects and things like that. And I want to give a chance, for Q&A at the end. So this will be an action-packed workshop. And I want to thank you so much, for joining us for it. So you probably know about Moonbeam, but Moonbeam, the architecture of it is different from that of Ethereum because it's built with Substrate. So its underlying, architecture is quite different from that of Ethereum's, but the end user experience and the developer experience is quite familiar, and if not better. So we're not just an EVM. We have many different layers that we provide on top. We have a Web3 RPC, which means that you can query a Moonbeam node with the exact same request that you'd make to an Ethereum node. So you could say something like ETH get balance, and you get back the corresponding balance that you're expecting on the respective Moonbeam network, whether that's Moonbeam or Moonriver or Moonbase Alpha. You don't have to make any changes, to the parameters or any changes to your request. So as you can imagine, this makes, switching an application and deploying, onto Moonbeam or Moonriver, quite a breeze because you don't have to, re-engineer, all of your, all of your front end and all of your, interface and things like that. We also have a unified account structure. This is very important because early on, we made this engineering decision, which was, it was a heavy lift, but it's paid dividends. And the reason is because if you want to interact with both the EVM, well, first, you'll need an Ethereum address to interact with the EVM. But then if you want to interact with Substrate native functions enabled by Polkadot, such as on-chain governance, you need to have a Polkadot address. And Polkadot addresses or Substrate style addresses are completely different. They have a different private key. They have a completely different, format. They're not the same H160 format. And so if you wanted to have, the best of both worlds, you need to have 2 different accounts. And so we quickly realized early on that, this is not going to be suitable, for the end user experience. And so we combined it into, a single Ethereum account allows you to access both the EVM as well as the Substrate functions, with no compromises. So all you have to do is keep one Ethereum account, and you probably already have that. And you only need to maintain, one private key. So moving right along, we also have a huge number of developer tools and integrations. So everything that Ethereum developers are used to working with, whether that's Hard Hat, Scaffold ETH, or many others, they all work seamlessly on Moonbeam. And that's because of our commitment to seamless Ethereum compatibility. We've been, primarily focused on enabling this seamless Ethereum compatibility, for a long time. And so, any new changes that Ethereum releases, any new EIPs, we have that in line, to be integrated, into Moonbeam as well, such as EIP 1559, which went in, several months ago. So let's get on to the fun part, and that is Xcm. That's why we're all here today, and that's what our bounties are focused on. So Xcm, first of all, is not really a protocol or a technology. Really, all it is just a standard for writing messages. So when you describe it like that, it sounds a bit boring, but Xcm is actually extremely powerful, and it's something that Moonbeam is quite excited about, and of course, all of the Polkadot ecosystem. So Xcm is just a generic standard for writing messages. And these type of messages, you have to be very explicit and pedantic in how you're constructing a message, because there's sort of limitless possibilities, but because of that, you have to specify exactly what you want to do in very explicit detail. There's not a lot that's assumed when you're writing an Xcm message. It's not like there's a huge template or something where exactly what you want to do is already assumed. No, you have to specify in detail exactly what you'd like to do in your message. Now, typically, if you're a front-end developer or a DApp developer, you're not going to be too worried about Xcm message construction, because several of the details are abstracted away and presented to you in precompiles, so that you can provide the appropriate parameters, but you don't have to worry too much about building an Xcm message from scratch. And we'll talk more about how to construct a message using the X tokens precompile, and we'll speak more about that a little bit later. The next thing to mention is that Xcm is designed to be efficient and lightweight. So it's designed to be run in an on-chain manner, where we have to be careful about execution resources. But before we can send an Xcm message, you always have to have a channel set up. And channels are one way. So that means that if you want to have back and forth communication, you do need to open up two different channels. So they're single direction channels. And these requests, they need to be made on an opt-in fashion. So a request is made by the origin chain, and it needs to be accepted by the destination chain in order for Xcm messages to actually be able to be received by the destination chain. So the first example we have here is vertical message passing, and that refers to messages that are passed between the Polkadot relay chain, or the Kusama relay chain, and a parachain. So that's just what we mean when we say vertical message passing. Next, we have cross-chain message passing, and cross-chain message passing is referring when you're communicating from parachain to parachain. Now, at this time, we don't have direct, one-hop parachain to parachain connection. Everything first goes through the relay chain. So you have two instances of VMP. If you want to send a message from Moonbeam to another parachain, it first goes up to the relay chain, and then it is transmitted down to the other parachain. Now, this is going to be changed, in a future release. It'll be updated so you can have Xcm channels that are direct to other parachains. This will also be much more efficient, so that this there's less, state bloat state bloat on the relay chain. So that'll be much more seamless. So this leads us along to our first demo, and I want to introduce the concept of the sovereign account before I go into kind of explaining how we can transfer funds around from the relay chain to a parachain, and from a parachain to a relay chain. So a sovereign account is a parachain owned account that exists on another parachain or a relay chain. So as an example, Moonbeam has a sovereign account on the Polkadot relay chain, and Moonriver has a sovereign account on the Kusama relay chain. So a sovereign account is a very special type of account. There are no private keys to this account. Funds can only be sent from this account via specific and valid Xcm instructions. So again, I'll repeat, a sovereign account has no private keys. Funds can only be transferred via Xcm. You can sort of think of a sovereign account a bit like a locking smart contract on Ethereum bridges, but this is much more secure. Remember that this is all being validated by the same relay chain. So you're never going to have a scenario where you have, two different consensus protocols, and one thinks that one thing happened and another one, does not have that same idea of events. And that's a possibility that could certainly happen when you're bridging between, different EVM-based chains. But instead, on Polkadot, all this happens under the same relay chain. Now, you can construct a sovereign account deterministically. It's pretty straightforward to do that, and we will construct a sovereign account using a tool built by Alberto. This is called the Xcm tools repo, and he has a number of different tools there, but we'll demo how to create a sovereign account in just a second. Essentially, the construction of it is concatenating first para with a specific parachain ID. So Moonriver's parachain ID is 2023. And so we're going to go ahead and construct a sovereign account first doing that. So I want to go to the Xcm tools repo, so you see where that is. And we can go ahead and clone this. And then I'm going to go to the terminal, and let me see if I can share my screen for this real quick. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. And so we'll go ahead and clone this repo. And then we're going to cd into Xcm tools. And we're just going to run yarn. Make sure that everything is all ready to go. And we have a bunch of different tools here, but the one we're going to be focusing on today is calculating the sovereign address. So we can use the command tsnode, calculate sovereign address, and we need to provide two different parameters here. The first is the parachain ID, so that'll be para ID 2023. And for this example, we're interested in calculating Moonriver's sovereign account on the Kusama relay chain. So suppose we don't know what account that is, we're going to provide these parameters, and we'll go ahead and calculate that. So the next parameter that we need to specify is the relay chain. So we're going to say relay Kusama, and go ahead and press enter. And we can see here we have the sovereign account address on the relay chain. Now we do want to make one more quick step, and that's we want to convert this account into something that's a bit more readable and a bit more specific to Kusama. So for that, I'm going to go to Sean Tabrizi's utilities tool here, and I'm going to head down to change address prefix, and I'm going to provide this full address here. And the exact prefix that I need to specify is 2 for Kusama. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this account, and let's see if that's the valid ID. We will go ahead to Kusama subscan, and I'll go ahead and paste this in here. And we can see here a specific account here for para 2023. So that's Moonriver's sovereign account on Kusama. So that worked just fine. And you can see here we have a balance of just over 5.5 million KSM in Moonriver's sovereign account on Kusama. So you can repeat these same steps for other parachains as well. It's not just limited, to Moonriver. You can make these exact steps for other chains as well. So I'm going to head back to the presentation real quick. And let's see. Did I lose the presenter view? No. I got the presenter view back.
You need to share your screen. There we go.
Cool, cool. So we just went over these steps for the sovereign account. And I put a screenshot here just so you can remember to always provide the para ID as well as the relay chain that you're looking at. So this concept of the sovereign account, how does it work in practice, and what is it used for, right? So the sovereign account will hold on to funds, and it will only release these funds, when it has these specific Xcm instructions that allow it to do so. So as an example, let's look at the example of transferring assets from the Polkadot relay chain to Moonbeam. So typically a user is going to be interacting with a DApp, such as apps.moonbeam.network. So they won't see, maybe this exact sequence of events, but this is what will be happening, under the hood. So Alice will specify how many dots she'd like to migrate to Moonbeam, and then that will initiate a transaction to transfer the dot to Moonbeam's sovereign account. Now, Moonbeam's sovereign account will receive it, and then a equal amount of XC dots will be minted on Moonbeam. Now there are a little bit of execution fees, so you'll receive slightly less than the transferred amount, but it's a very small fee. And so once you have your XC dots on Moonbeam, that is in the form of an XC-20, which is very powerful, and we'll touch on exactly what an XC-20 is in just a minute. But I just want to speak, excuse me, about the transfer process. Now, when you're going the other way, let's say you're going from a parachain to a relay chain. If you want to transfer your XC dots back to Moonbeam, again, you'll be going through a DApp typically or a UI, but your XC dots will be programmatically burned. It's not going to a random burn address. This is a programmatic burning of those tokens. And then Moonbeam's sovereign account will be able to release those tokens that were originally locked in the sovereign account. So I also want to point out that when you have your XC dots, you can transfer, you can trade them, you can put them in DeFi, you can do all sorts of things. And so the person who redeems those XC dots might not necessarily be the original person who transferred them over, and that is perfectly fine. For the sake of this example, actually, we have two different people. We have Charlotte and Charlie, so we're indicating that there are two different people. And these XC dots are redeemable for these native dot tokens. And as an example, let's also look at transferring assets between Parachain to Parachain. So if you want to transfer Glimmer, for example, from the Moonbeam network to another Parachain, you can absolutely do that. The other Parachain will have a sovereign account on Moonbeam. And as a reminder, Moonbeam is not going to have any control over this sovereign account. This sovereign account, is owned by the other parachain, and then funds are only going to move out of it, via Xcm instructions. So once those glimmers are in that parachain's sovereign account, then derivative glimmers can be minted on the parachain and used, in a variety of ways, and then they can always come back to Moonbeam and be redeemed, for the original glimmers at any time. Now, we've talked about transferring assets, but why are we so excited about XC-20s? So XC-20s are a new token standard, which kicked off with the launch of Xcm on Moonriver. They're such a powerful asset category because these are substrate native assets. That means they're natively compatible with Xcm. You can transfer them around. They're interoperable assets, and so they're very powerful in that regard. You can access and interact with them through the Substrate API. But in addition, these XC20 assets are fully compatible with the ERC20 interface. That means that no changes are required in order for you to utilize these assets in DeFi, to be able to transfer them around, use them in any sort of manner as you would in ERC20. And as you know, developers have tons of different use cases, and there are lots of different applications that use ERC20s. So that's the reason that we're so excited about this, is that it's not a compromise. XC20s can be utilized and accessed via the Ethereum API. They can be used in the exact same way that ERC20 tokens are. And so that opens up a huge world of different use cases and applications that are already working with ERC20s. And so adding support for XC20s, in the case DEXs, for example, they can list these XC20 assets quite easily. I want to show you a demo in terms of how we're going to actually transfer XC20s around. Now, I don't want to move too quickly, so I want to take a brief pause here to see if anybody has any questions. Yes, these are recorded, so these will be available on YouTube, or they'll be available on this Crowdcast link after the session. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to the rest of the demo. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I just need to change the exact window that I'm sharing. Okay, so we should see a window here with the Xcm asset, but that's not quite what I want to show you right this minute. What I want to show you first is transferring assets through Polkadot.js apps. So let's first take a look at the Assets tab. I'm in Moonbase Alpha on Polkadot.js, and we have a ton of different cross-chain assets that are listed here. This is a testing place through to Moon River and Moonbeam. They all get tested first in the public testnet. So the asset that I want to focus on here is actually one called XC-Unit. XC-Unit is the native token of the Moonbase Relay testnet. Now, a bit of context. So, as you know, we have a public testnet, called Moonbase Alpha, and that is a parachain. But what you might not know is that we also run our own relay chain testnet. That's called Moonbase Relay. And you can think of Moonbase Relay as you would Kusama or Polkadot. So it is a relay chain, and the native token of the Moonbase Relay chain is XC-Units. So if you're a developer and you're working on a XC20 application, one of the very first things that you might want to do is get some XC-Units in order to play around and test your XC20 DApps. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. One of the first things that I want to highlight is that we have a brand new faucet. So if you head to apps.moonbeam.network/moonbasealpha/faucet, we can go ahead and post this link actually in the channel. Oh, I'm sorry. Should I zoom in a bit? Maybe it's not zoomed in enough. Is that any better?
It is better on my side.
What if I shrink down the page a little bit?
Oh, much better.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Thanks, Kevin.
No problem. I think it was trying to scale it to a square screen. So we used to have this Moonbase Alpha faucet in Discord, but we've migrated it to a website. So it works the same as the old one. You can just plug in your address here, and I don't need to go through those steps right now. But I just wanted to show you how to get dev funds. And then after that, you'll want to head to Moonbeam Uniswap, which I can post the link to that here. This is a deployment of Uniswap v2, which has been, specifically has added, a bunch of different ERC20 assets, as well as XC20 assets. So what you can do is after you've gone to the faucet, you can go ahead and make a swap you can swap one dev, and you can go ahead and get some XC unit tokens to test. So we can go ahead and confirm this swap. We'll get a couple extra XC units here. And then we can go ahead and actually do a cross-chain transfer. So this transaction will go through in just a minute or two. And I'm going to go back to Polkadot JS apps, and I want to show you where we could go to actually make a transfer. So we're going to go to the developer tab. We're going to go to extrinsics, and then we are going to go to we're going to go to X tokens. And I don't know if you can see my MetaMask here. I suspect that you cannot see my MetaMask here. That's just fine. All I want to point out is that in my MetaMask, I have an account called Polkadot Hackathon. And let me actually, let me pull up this account just so you can see what's going on in it. So I'm going to go to Moonbase. Let's see, Moonbase, Moonscan. So let's open this up. And this is one account here, but that's not the account that I want to show. So I want to show a specific account here. Okay, so you can see here that we just performed a swap. We swapped one dev, and then we got some XC units here. Now, this doesn't have a full profile page. It's just on the testnet, so that's why you can't see the name of the asset. But rest assured, this is the XC unit asset. And so what I'd like to do is this XC unit asset right now is living on Moonbase Alpha. So it's living on a parachain, and we'd like to transfer it to the relay chain. So let's head back to Polkadot JS apps, and we are opening up the X tokens palette, and we want to perform a transfer action. There's a couple different other ones here, but for this purpose, for this demonstration, we only need the transfer one. Now, next you have a couple different options here for currency. It could be self-reserve, it could be a foreign asset, it could be a local asset. A local asset would be something exists on the parachain, whereas a foreign asset is one that originates from outside of Moonbase Alpha, the parachain. And that's what we're going to choose in this case, because the XC unit actually originates from the relay chain. So it does not originate from this parachain of Moonbase Alpha. So we're going to choose a foreign asset. Next thing, we need to specify which foreign asset are we going to be transferring. And you can get that information from the Assets tab. And I'm going to switch to a new tab just so we can kind of quickly go back and forth. So the asset ID for XC unit is this very long string here. It starts with 42, and it has many different commas in between. That's slightly annoying, but there's an easy way to get rid of those commas. And you can go ahead and just copy and paste and click out all of the commas. But for the purposes of this demonstration, there's a bit of a shortcut. You can convert the number from a decimal into a hexadecimal, and then you can convert it back to a decimal. Now, there's no technical reason why you need to do this. This is just to get rid of the commas. That's all we're doing here. So I want to save your time today, and I don't want to go through and delete all the commas one by one. So that's just the shortcut that I'm making there. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to specify a balance to transfer. Now, for the balance that we're going to transfer, for one unit, that actually requires 12 decimal points, so or 12 zeros. So we're going to specify 12 zeros, 3, and that will be 1 XC unit token. Next, we have a version of Xcm. So we're just indicating what version of Xcm we want to use. In this case, we want to use V1. Whenever there's a V2, you may use V2, but just be aware of any ramifications of that change, you may have to define certain things differently, perhaps, depending upon which version. Multi-location is how we are going to define where we're going to send this asset. So we've already identified the asset that we want to send. We've identified it with this foreign asset and then a specific ID. We've already said the amount that we want to send, but we haven't said where we want to send it to. And so what we're going to specify here with this multi-location is exactly where we want the cross-chain asset to go. Now in Xcm, we're always defining where we want to go relative to where we already are. You can think of this as similar to browsing a Unix file system, where you're changing directories, and you might say cd ... to go up one directory, or you might cd into down one directory. You could also say cd ... / ... and go up two directories at a time. So we're always defining things not in absolute terms, but we're defining things relative to where we already are. And the reason for this is not to make your life more difficult, but it's meant to make Xcm as flexible and extensible as possible. Because what happens in the future when there are layer 2s and things like that, we could be on a layer 2, and then we have to define going to a parachain, and then define going to a relay chain. So that's the reason that we're defining everything in relative terms. For this demonstration, we only need to go up one level because we're going from the Moonbase Alpha parachain to the relay chain. So we're going to specify a 1 here because we're going up one level. And then with this interior element, interior is basically how many different parameters do we need to describe where we're going. And in this case, we actually only need 1. So we're going to choose x1, and then we are going to choose a specific account here. So we can choose account ID 32 for a substrate style address. Let me know if I'm going too fast, and I can slow down and explain this all. But in general, all we're doing here is x1 says we need 1 metric or 1 parameter to define where we're going. x2, if we chose that, would give us 2 options. So we could define, for example, another parachain that we'd like to transfer to, as well as another account ID. So that's probably what we'd use if we were going to another parachain. But in this case, we're just going to the relay chain, so we're going to only need 1 parameter. And we're going to choose an account ID 32. And we can choose any for network, that's just fine. And the account that we'd like to transfer to is the one that I have here, conveniently named Polkadot Hackathon Moonbase Alpha. And actually, let me see. That is an Ethereum style address. So I actually want to go to the Moonbase relay testnet. So this is the actual address that I want here. So this is a different one. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this address. So you can see this is a substrate style address, and it already has a balance of 1.99 units. So just keep that in mind when we make the transfer. We should see this balance increase accordingly. So I'm going to paste that in. For your destination weight, you can go ahead and enter 1 billion. So that's 9 zeros. And what we can do is, if you wanted to make a backup, for example, if you wanted to try this a couple different times, you can always copy the encoded call data. That's always a good idea because you can paste that in, and then you can decode it and see if you made any mistakes or anything like that. So this looks good. We're going to go ahead and submit this transaction. And if all was correct, then we should see that we will have transferred 1 XC unit from the Moonbase Alpha parachain to the Moonbase relay chain. So fingers crossed. Let's go ahead and see if this transaction is valid and goes through. Feel free to drop any questions in the sidebar. I'm actively looking at the sidebar so I can pick up any questions. Okay, and that transaction was successful. You can see a couple different events that happened here. We can actually let's see if the transaction has gone through. Yes, and we can see that our balance has increased to 2.9 units. So we've successfully transferred from the Moonbase Alpha Parachain to the Relay chain. Now, one more thing which I want to look at quite quickly is to see if we can find this event in the, here we go. So we can see here a bunch of different items in the log here. We can see X tokens.transferred multi-assets. We can see the amount of the assets. So we transferred 1 billion XC units. We can see where it was going. We can see that some assets were burned for fees. And there should also be a little bit of a balance transfer. Let's see. EVM log. Okay, I guess that's all that we see here. So that's just fine. You can always check here if you want more information about the transfer that took place. So everybody with me so far? We're going to move to the precompile, and I want to make sure that we all, understand this step before we move on. Because in the precompile, we're going to be performing, a very similar step. We're going to be doing the same type of transfer, but it's just going to be using the X tokens precompile instead of through Polkadot.js apps. Okay, so I'm in Remix, and I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. We're going to start from scratch. And the first thing that we're going to do when we're interacting with the X tokens precompile is we're just going to go ahead and fetch the latest copy of it from the GitHub repository. So I'll paste this link here if you want to follow along. And we can go ahead and copy the contents of the X tokens precompile, and we can paste it into Remix. I'm going to make sure that this is all compiled, which it is, no problem. And I'm going to head back to the Deploy and Run tab. Next thing I'm going to do is make sure that my environment here is injected Web3, which it is. I'm also going to make sure that I'm on the Moonbase Alpha testnet, which I am. And I'm going to clear out these values here from earlier. And so that we're all starting, from the same place. So all we did right now was copy X tokens here. We compiled it, and we're not going to deploy it because this is a precompile. It's already deployed. We just need to access it. So we typically include in the comments here the address at which the precompile is accessible. So you can paste this in, and you can go ahead and press add address, and we can interact with the X tokens precompile. Now, just like we did in Polkadot.js apps, we're going to be using transfer here. And when we're using transfer, we need to input a currency address here. Now, one thing that's really important is that this currency address is not the same thing as the asset ID. The currency address is actually where is the exact XC unit located here. So if I just go to Moonbase Alpha Moonscan and I click on the XC unit token, you can see that the address here for the XC unit token is what we're actually going to need. So you can copy that, and you can head back to Remix. And we're just going to paste this for the currency address. Now, heading back to Moonbase Alpha Moonscan, I just want to show you how much I have left here. So I should have some tokens that are available. So that looks good. And heading back to Remix, we can specify an amount. We're going to specify, the same number of, or we'll specify a different amount just so it's a bit more clear. We'll say we want to transfer 2 units, and we're going to have to provide 12 zeros here in order to get the units correctly. And now we get to the most complicated part, which is building a struct in order to clarify the destination. Now, building this struct is the exact same, multi-location struct that we created in Polkadot.js apps. We're just constructing it, a bit differently. Now, the struct that we're going to be defining here is a multi-location struct with a uint8 for the number of parents, as well as specifying an interior component where we are specifying, again, the same thing that was specified in Polkadot.js. We just have to make sure that this is formatted very particularly. So I will go ahead and just kind of construct it right here so you can see. I guess I shouldn't here because that might mess up the contract. We can build it directly here. So the first thing that we're going to do is provide a bracket, and we're going to specify a 1 here. Why are we specifying a 1? Well, that's just the parent's value. And again, we're going from the Moonbase Parachain, Moonbase Alpha Parachain, to the Moonbase Relay Chain. So we're only going up 1 level. So we just need to specify a 1 here. Now, the next thing that we need to specify is this multi-location interior component. And I went ahead to the Moonbeam docs site because there are some very important components there. And so for this demo, let's go ahead and head to docs.moonbeam.network. And we can head to the builder section, XC-20s, and send XC-20s. I'll just scroll down here to the bottom. And when we're interacting with this precompile, there's a couple different things that we need to specify. Now, in Polkadot.js, they break it down easily so you can choose, hey, the next parameter that I'm specifying is actually going to be an account ID 32. But when you're constructing this in the precompile, you have to use a specific value or a selector value, which indicates the next value that you're going to provide. So we're not going to provide just the account ID. We have to first choose a selector here, which says that we're going to be providing an account ID 32 next. So the selector that we use in this case is 0x01, and then we provide the account ID, which has to be in hexadecimal. So let's go ahead back to Remix, and let's go ahead and start constructing this. So we're going to have a bracket, we're going to have a quote, and we're going to have 0x and 01. Now, we need to specify which account that we're going to, and my account here could be found here on Polkadot Hackathon. And we're going to go back to Sean Tabrizi utilities because we're going to need that again. And so his utilities were here. And we need to convert this account ID to hex. So I'm just converting my account ID on the Moonbase Alpha relay chain to hexadecimal. And then we're going to copy it back here into Remix. Now, there's one thing that I want to point out, and that's that we do need to take out the first 0x at the beginning of this account ID, otherwise we will get an error. So you see how there's this extra 0x in front of the account. I'm just going to remove that. And then at the very end, there's one more thing that we need to provide here. So heading back to the doc site, we're going to specify network any. And the way that we specify that is by padding this value with 2 zeros at the end of the account ID 32 that we have provided. Let me know if you have any questions in the sidebar. I'm actively monitoring for any questions. So we're just going to provide that 0, 0 at the end. We're going to close up the end quote, and then we just need 2 brackets to finish this off. And finally, we're going to specify a weight here, as we did in Polkadot.js apps. We're going to specify 1 billion here. So I'm going to need 9 zeros. Now, that should be everything that we need. So we've specified a currency address for XC unit. Again, this is not the same as the asset ID. We specified an amount that we want to transfer. I want to transfer 2 XC units from Moonbase, the Parachain, to Moonbase, the relay chain. And then we have a destination struct here, where the first thing that we're doing is we're looking at the number of parents, and then we are specifying first we're specifying exactly the account here that we're going to be providing, but first we're indicating what we're specifying. So we're indicating, okay, we're going to be providing an account ID 32. We're following that up with an account in hex, and then we're finishing it up with saying it can be any network. And so we just have to add those 2 zeros at the end. So that's it. Let's go ahead and try this transaction. If it goes through, we will be sending, again, from the Moonbase Parachain to the relay chain. If you get an error here, let's see if it goes through. It's quite common, to get an error, such as formatting. And, the biggest thing that you need to check is make sure that you have, the right format here for your struct. So maybe you have an extra quote or you forgot a closing bracket. That's quite common. On our doc site, we have, examples of how to make this and construct this struct. So we'll go ahead and confirm this. And just a reminder, right, this transaction is going through on the Moonbase Alpha EVM, and then this EVM is making and essentially, the precompile is exposing, the substrate functionality of Xcm, and that's what will be actually making that transfer. So this transaction went through, and we can go ahead and head back to the Moonbase relay chain and then see if our balance has increased. And it has. It's increased by 2. So it was successful. And that's how that you can interact with the X tokens precompile if you want to transfer tokens. Now you can see that there are many different use cases for this, and you can integrate this into your application. Maybe constructing the struct for your first time could be a bit tricky, but after you've gotten the hang of it, it's quite straightforward. So I want to head back to the presentation, and I want to wrap up with showing you kind of where we are in terms of a state of the union in terms of where we are with Xcm and XC20 integrations. So let's go ahead and head back to the presentation. I will go ahead and stop sharing here, and then I will just restart my sharing on the presentation. Okay, so where are we right now? Well, here's a map of all the live Xcm channels on Kusama and Polkadot. This was created May 30th. This is something that's going to have to be frequently updated, all the time, because there are new integrations that are going live just about every week. So this is a document that's going to have to be updated, quite a lot. As you can imagine, there are more parachains on Kusama, and Moon River has been around, for a longer period of time. So there are plenty more channels that are live on Kusama, but there are new ones, that are being added on Polkadot quite regularly. Now there are a couple of prerequisites before we can, open up a channel, to a new parachain. Now, one of the prerequisites is that the parachain needs to be sufficiently decentralized. In other words, it can't have pseudo enabled. That's one very important requirement. And another one is that it needs to be tested. So we need to test this on Moonbase Alpha and Moonbase Alpha relay chain, and we need to test certain things like the fee structure, right? Are we charging enough for these transfers, or are we undercharging, or overcharging? So that's something that's very important that needs to be tested. There are a number of XC-20s that are on Moonbeam, and just to give you a quick sample, I ran these calculations yesterday. We have over 500,000 XC dot on Moonbeam. So over 500,000 dot has been migrated, from the Polkadot relay chain. We also have a couple different assets, including Akala, the AUSD stablecoin, and we just launched Parallel Finance. So on Moon River, we have a couple more XC-20s. We have a huge amount of XCKSM. We have XC Remark, Kurura. We have XCA USD, and we also have Kintsugi BTC. So I want to reiterate that XC-20s are in use today. This is not, theoretical or hypothetical. This is something that's in use and being used by the community. On Uber has launched an XCKSM market, so they have about $5 million of XCKSM that has been supplied. And then another very large application is Lido liquid staking. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But there's a outstanding supply of about 2 million STKSM. And STKSM is a liquid token that represents staked KSM. And a liquid token meaning that you can do all sorts of things with it. It's not locked up. You can put it into DeFi or do many different things with it. And you don't have to wait for the staking unbonding period with your STKSM. Whereas typically, on the really trading, farming on a variety of different demo of send .network and kind of introduce you. Yeah.
I think we lost you for a second. Can you repeat the last part? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Sorry. Thank you. So I was just saying the XC20 use cases are by no means extensive. These are, just a sample of what's out there. So there's many more, and I'm just covering just a sample. And the demo that I want to give next is to kind of introduce you to why we need an Xcm Explorer and why we've been having Xcm Explorer bounties in a variety of different hackathons. Why is it so important? And so for this demo, I want to go ahead and make a transfer, on apps.moonbeam.network. Now, just to reiterate, there's no problem with the interface. Apps.moonbeam.network, is comprehensive and it has a great design, and everything, is working quite well. The issue comes when you're trying to look at the status of your cross-chain transfers. So as an example, let's go ahead and migrate some XCKSM from Moonriver to the Kusama relay chain. So I'm going to press withdraw. And when we withdraw something, we just need to specify a Kusama address. So I'm going to go ahead and copy my Kusama address. And I'm going to specify a small amount, let's say 0.02 XCKSM. I'm going to press send. And you may not be able to see my MetaMask, but I'm going to confirm this transaction. And this is going to be going through X tokens. So apps.moonbeam.network is going to be calling the X tokens precompile, similar to how we just made the transfer on Moonbase Alpha. So what I'd like to do next is I want to check the status of this transaction by going to Moonscan. And I'm going to copy my account here. And the exact account that I want to use is one that's a little bit different. So that's right here. And we see that a transaction just went through 32 seconds ago. And this was interacting with the X tokens precompile. But there's a couple of problems here, right? All we see is that I interacted with this contract. I don't know that I was transferring XCKSM, for example. I don't know where this XCKSM is going, and I have no idea what the value is. In fact, if you're just making a transfer, let's say between your own wallets, maybe this is not as big of a deal. But let's say, for example, that my friend was just getting started on Kusama, and all of my KSM was locked up in staking on the relay chain. So I don't have any Kusama to send him. But oops, hey, it looks like I have some XCKSM. So I could send that to my friend. So let's say that I did that, right? And I said, okay, here's the transaction hash, sent, done. this provides no other information to the receiving party. And so to further emphasize this, we can go ahead and look on Subscan, Kusama Subscan. I'm going to look up the address that I was making the transfer to, and we can see here that there's a KSM balance, but we don't see any extrinsic here that says that there was a transfer that took place. Now we're running out of time, and so I didn't have time to show you the starting balance and the ending balance, but the starting balance here for this wallet was about 2.9 because I was transferring 0.02 KSM. This balance did increase, but there's nothing here that tells me that the balance increased. I can scroll along to all these different fields, and I don't see anything here. That is quite problematic in terms of the clarity of these cross-chain transfers. You can see it leaving from the Moon River side. You can see it leaving from the Parachain side, but you don't know where it's going. You don't know the value, and you don't know the asset that's being transferred. You can see the balance increase at the destination, but we don't know. We have no context as to how that happened. So that's kind of the challenge behind building a cross-chain explorer. And this exact bounty I'll get to in just a second in more detail. But I wanted to kind of touch on what are the differences here between XC-20s versus ERC-20s. So anybody can deploy an ERC-20 to Moonbeam or Moon River. It takes less than 5 minutes. You can do it in 30 seconds. Now, if you'd like to launch an XC-20, that is a bit more complex. And the reason it's a bit more complex is because cross-chain assets have to be listed and they have to be added via governance. So the community has to sign off excuse me, at these assets being added. And when we speak about an external XC-20, these are assets that originate outside of Moonbeam, such as the relay chain or another parachain. And then a mintable XC-20 refers to a cross-chain asset that's being launched on Moonbeam itself. And that's an asset that you can mint more of depending on how you've set that asset up. But the common thread that unites all of these different assets is that they're all accessible via the ERC-20 interface. And they're all accessible via the Ethereum API. Something to be very, very excited about. We're running out of time, so I want to quickly just mention a few more things. The first one is that Lido's liquid staking and kind of how that works. So when you deposit XCKSM into a Lido contract, Lido will actually call a precompile called the Xcm transactor. And the Xcm transactor will take this specific action that Lido has has programmed, and it will remotely stake tokens on the Kusama relay chain. Now, what's the importance of this? Why is this such a big deal? Well, being able to do a remote contract call and take an action, on another chain is a very powerful and forward-looking feature of Xcm. Now, transferring value around is very, very important in cross-chain assets, but we see this remote contract call as being perhaps transformational and opening up a huge amount of possibilities. So moving right along, that's kind of what I wanted to mention in my look ahead at what Xcm could do. You could be on another parachain, and you could be able to make a remote contract call into Moonbeam's EVM without ever having an account on Moonbeam, without having any Glimmer. You can pay execution fees in a native token for a different chain, and so you can benefit from functionality that's available on other parachains, and vice versa. You could be on Moonbeam, and you might be able to make a remote contract call to another parachain without ever having that native token, in order to make that contract call. So you can see how the possibilities here are quite limitless. And this is early on. This is something that's still in development, but it's something to look forward to and something to think about when you're building your applications in terms of how you can build and launch your cross-chain applications and how you can design them to be upgraded with this in the future. So I think that's all that I have time for today. if anybody has any last minute questions, I'd be able to take them. Otherwise, we'll wrap up.
And one more thing to add here, every Wednesday, Kevin is on our Discord channel. I'll share the link here in the chat, and we have office hours with him. So if you guys have any questions about the challenges or like any tutorial or any video that you guys see, please feel free to join us.
I dropped a link to the bounties for the Polkadot North America Hackathon. So we have all of our bounties listed there. Be sure to check it out, and I highly encourage you to get involved. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll see you next week, same time, same place, for the next version of this workshop. And the next version, we'll be looking at cross-chain bridges, so focusing on the other two bounties that we have. Thank you so much.